Throughout recorded history, dominant powers have risen to command the world, convinced their strength would last indefinitely. Yet without exception, every one of them followed the same path to collapse. Not by accident, not by invasion, but by repeating a sequence so consistent it might as well be mechanical. 3 global powers, 5 centuries, identical outcomes, different cultures, different systems, different beliefs, the same ending every time. Spain controlled the world's wealth and bankrupted itself within a lifetime. Britain ruled the largest empire in history and lost it in a single generation. The Soviet Union matched its rival militarily and disintegrated without a war. What makes this pattern dangerous isn't that it exists. It's that no empire ever recognizes it while it's happening. Each one believes it's different. Each one believes the rules no longer apply. And each one discovers too late that history does not negotiate. What should concern us now is that the United States is no longer approaching this pattern. We are already deep inside it. The early stages are complete. The later ones are beginning to appear. The question is no longer whether this sequence applies to us. It's how much time remains before it finishes. This is an examination of how dominance erodes, why powerful nations fail to change course, and why the mathematics of imperial decline do not recognize exceptionalism. They operate regardless of technology, military strength, or national mythology. And they are operating now. When historians speak of imperial decline, they often focus on military defeats or political transitions. But the actual mechanism of collapse operates differently. Empires do not fall because they lose wars. They lose wars because they have already fallen economically. The process begins with overreach. A dominant power extends its commitments beyond what its economic foundation can sustain. Military presence spreads across continents. Defense obligations multiply. Interventions become routine. At this stage, the empire appears strong because it is everywhere, but this ubiquity disguises the strain on its resource base. Initially, the costs remain manageable. Tax revenue covers expenses. The currency maintains value. Allies remain loyal. But beneath this apparent stability, fundamental problems accumulate. Economic output shifts away from production toward services and finance. Manufacturing capacity migrates to other nations. The population begins consuming more than it creates. Then monetary distortion begins. Unable to fund obligations through productive economic activity, the government manipulates its currency. In earlier eras, this meant reducing precious metal content in coins. In modern times, it means expanding the money supply without corresponding growth in real wealth. The effect is identical. The currency loses purchasing power, though the immediate impact remains hidden by the currency's dominant position in global trade. Debt accumulation follows naturally. As revenue fails to match spending, borrowing increases. Early debts seem manageable, even prudent, but as obligations compound, interest payments begin consuming larger portions of revenue. Eventually, the government borrows simply to service existing debt, a point of no return that previous empires reached repeatedly. Meanwhile, productive capacity continues eroding. When a nation can purchase anything by issuing currency or debt, domestic production becomes less important. Why manufacture goods when you can import them? Why invest in industry when finance pays better? This logic seems sound until the currency weakens or credit dries up. Then the absence of productive infrastructure becomes catastrophic. Social cohesion fragments under economic stress. Wealth inequality grows as financial manipulation benefits asset holders while eroding wage earners' purchasing power. Public trust in institutions declines. Political dysfunction increases. The best talent emigrates to more stable environments. What remains is a society living on accumulated wealth rather than creating new value. The acceleration comes suddenly. Allies who once depended on the empire begin making alternative arrangements. Trading partners develop systems that bypass the dominant currency. Rival powers test boundaries that would previously have been unthinkable. The empire discovers that its influence rested on economic strength, and that strength has evaporated. Finally comes the collapse itself. Not gradual decline over centuries, but rapid disintegration over years or even months. The currency fails. Debt becomes unpayable. Military forces cannot be maintained. The empire that seemed permanent vanishes with stunning speed, leaving populations bewildered at how quickly their world changed. This is not theoretical speculation. It is documented history, and it has happened 3 times in succession, each time to powers that considered themselves immune to such fates. Spain's dominance began in the late 15th century, when Spanish conquistadors encountered the richest deposits of precious metals ever discovered. The conquest of Aztec and Inca civilizations placed Spanish monarchs in control of gold and silver mines that produced staggering quantities of wealth. By the mid-1500s, annual silver shipments to Spain exceeded 200 tons. Within decades, this increased to 400 tons yearly. This influx influx of precious metals made Spain the financial center of the known world. Spanish currency became the international standard. Every merchant wanted Spanish silver. Every banker lent to Spanish kings. The wealth seemed inexhaustible, and Spanish monarchs spent accordingly. King Philip II inherited an empire that spanned continents and a treasury that appeared bottomless. He used this wealth to pursue military objectives across the globe simultaneously. Spanish forces fought the Ottoman Empire throughout the Mediterranean basin. They battled French armies in Italy. They suppressed Protestant revolts in the Netherlands. They launched naval campaigns against England. They maintained garrisons in the Philippines and throughout the Americas. By the late 16th century, Spain had active military operations on 4 continents. The financial burden was immense. Roughly half of all crown revenue went directly to military expenditures. Yet even this enormous sum proved insufficient. The costs of maintaining empire consistently exceeded income, regardless of how much silver arrived from the New World. Unable to cover expenses through taxation or silver imports alone, the Spanish crown resorted to currency manipulation. Spanish mints began reducing the silver content of coins while maintaining their official value. Coins that should have been pure silver became half copper, then predominantly copper with only a silver coating. The face value remained unchanged, but the real value plummeted. Merchants were not fooled. By the early 1600s, Spanish currency traded at significant discounts. Inflation became severe. What had been the world's most trusted currency became increasingly suspect. Meanwhile, the crown's need for funds continued growing. Spain borrowed extensively from Italian and German banking houses. These loans came with high interest rates, but Spain's apparent wealth made lenders confident. That confidence proved misplaced. In 1557, less than 2 decades into Philip's reign, Spain declared itself unable to pay its debts. The crown restructured, promised reforms, and resumed borrowing. Bankruptcy repeated in 1560, again in 1575, and once more in 1596. For defaults within 4 decades, yet lenders continued extending credit, convinced that Spain's metal wealth would eventually make them whole. What no one fully recognized was that the silver had already caused irreversible economic damage. Spain's flood of wealth destroyed incentives for domestic production. Why cultivate crops when food could be imported? Why develop manufacturing when finished goods arrived from abroad? Why innovate when spending solved every problem? Spanish nobility increasingly viewed productive work as beneath their status. Agricultural development stagnated. Manufacturing capacity declined. The empire became purely extractive and consumptive, mining wealth in the Americas and spending it on foreign goods. Silver flowed into Spain and immediately back out to pay for French wines, Italian textiles, Dutch manufactured products, and endless imports from more productive economies. Spain became merely a transfer point. Wealth passed through Spanish hands without generating lasting prosperity. By 1600, Spain produced almost nothing of value besides the precious metals from its colonies. When mine production began declining, the entire structure collapsed. With economic failure came social disintegration. Madrid's streets filled with beggars. Crime became endemic. Anyone with skills or ambition emigrated to France, England, or the Netherlands, nations that were building productive economies rather than consuming extracted wealth. Spain retained bureaucrats, clergy, and soldiers, but lost its productive population. The empire began fracturing. Portugal regained independence in 1640. The Netherlands secured its freedom by 1650, taking with it Spain's most economically developed territory. By the early 1700s, Spain remained large on maps but empty of real power. The transformation from world dominator to regional irrelevance took less than a century. Today, Spain is a pleasant nation with rich culture and history, but it plays no significant role in global affairs. The descendants of conquistadors attract tourists. This is what imperial collapse produces, not destruction, but permanent irrelevance. 3 centuries after Spain's peak, Britain achieved a dominance that made Spanish power look modest by comparison. At its apex, the British Empire controlled 1/4 of Earth's land surface and governed 400 million subjects. The pound sterling functioned as the global reserve currency. Every major commercial contract used pounds. Every central bank held British bonds. London served as the planet's financial capital. British power seemed as permanent as Spain's once had. The Royal Navy commanded the seas. British industry led the world in manufacturing. British commerce dominated international trade. And just like Spain before it, Britain believed this dominance would continue indefinitely. The foundation was already weakening. By the early 20th century, Britain faced enormous costs defending territory across 6 continents. India, Africa, the Middle East, Asia-Pacific, the Caribbean, every region required military presence, colonial administration, and infrastructure investment. The expenses were staggering, but manageable during peacetime. Then came 1914. War erupted across Europe, and Britain faced a calculation. Remaining neutral would let European powers exhaust themselves while preserving British wealth. But it would also allow Germany to potentially dominate the continent, threatening long-term British interests. Britain chose to fight. World War I cost Britain approximately $40 billion, equivalent to roughly $1 trillion in current values. To finance the war, Britain borrowed massively, primarily from the United States. By 1918, Britain had transitioned from the world's leading creditor nation to owing billions to America. The power dynamic had reversed, though few recognized it at the time. Britain had won the war and retained its empire, but the financial damage was permanent. The conflict drained gold reserves that had backed the pound sterling. By 1920, Britain's gold holdings had fallen by half compared to 1914 levels. Yet the government attempted to restore the pound to its pre-war gold parity in 1925, hoping to maintain the currency's global status. This decision proved catastrophic. The pound was overvalued relative to Britain's actual economic strength. British exports became uncompetitive. Manufacturing declined. Unemployment rose. The government maintained high interest rates to defend the currency, which strangled domestic economic activity. The policy became unsustainable. In 1931, Britain abandoned the gold standard entirely. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. The global reserve currency had just demonstrated it could not honor its commitments. International confidence shattered. Britain never recovered from World War I's financial burden, yet within 20 years faced an even costlier conflict. World War II required another $120 billion in spending. Britain borrowed even more from America. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada more than Britain's entire annual economic output. Victory had come at the price of permanent financial subordination. The empire could no longer be defended or funded. In 1947, Britain withdrew from India, the source of wealth that had sustained British power for 2 centuries. Over the following 2 decades, the entire empire dissolved. African colonies, Middle Eastern territories, Southeast Asian possessions, Caribbean islands, all departed. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in history books. The pound continued falling. In 1940, 1 pound bought over $4. By 1950, this had dropped to $2.80. By 1970, $2.40. By 1980, less than $2.35. Today, it trades near $1.27. The currency that once dominated global finance became just another regional money. Britain maintained symbols of power, a permanent UN Security Council seat, nuclear weapons, rhetorical references to a special relationship with America. But these were museum pieces. Britain had become what it remains today, a former superpower living in its past, culturally significant but strategically marginal. The pattern had repeated. Overextension, monetary failure, debt accumulation, loss of productive base, imperial disintegration, currency collapse. Different era, identical sequence. After World War II, the Soviet Union emerged as America's only rival. Nuclear arsenals, control over Eastern Europe, technological achievement including space satellites, and a totalitarian system that seemed stable created the appearance of permanence. Soviet leaders proclaimed that communism would outlast capitalism. For 45 years, this seemed plausible. The USSR matched American military capabilities. More tanks, more missiles, more troops. From the outside, Soviet power looked formidable. But internally, the economy was dying from the moment the system began. Military spending consumed 15 to 20% of Soviet economic output, triple America's proportion. The USSR had to counter American technology, American alliances, and American global reach while operating from a far smaller economic base. Soviet forces occupied Afghanistan. Soviet subsidies supported Cuba, Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia, and numerous other client states. Every American sphere of influence required Soviet response. The costs became unbearable. By the 1970s, Soviet economic growth had essentially stopped. Oil revenue provided enough foreign currency to purchase essential imports, but domestic production was failing. Factories manufactured inferior goods. Agricultural output required massive grain imports. Technology fell decades behind Western standards. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union, possessing some of Earth's finest farmland, could not feed its own population. Central planning destroyed productivity. Without market prices, resources were misallocated. Without competition, innovation ceased. Without incentives, workers produced minimum output. The system generated impressive quantities of low-quality goods while failing to meet basic consumer needs. The ruble functioned as currency only within Soviet borders. Internationally, it had no value. Even Soviet citizens preferred dollars when they could obtain them. The government could only purchase foreign goods using gold or oil because no one wanted rubles. By the mid-1980s, oil prices had fallen and gold reserves were depleting. The USSR was running out of real money. When Mikhail Gorbachev attempted reforms, he inadvertently accelerated collapse. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Within a year, every Eastern European nation had abandoned communism. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, gone. The satellite empire that provided strategic depth vanished. The Soviet government could not prevent it because the government was bankrupt. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. From Berlin Wall to complete dissolution took approximately 900 days. No foreign invasion occurred. No military defeat happened. Pure economic implosion destroyed a nuclear superpower. Soldiers went unpaid. Government functions halted. The ruble became worthless. A nation with 30,000 nuclear weapons disintegrated from internal economic failure. The pattern had completed again. Overextension, economic stagnation, currency worthlessness, imperial loss, total collapse. 3 empires, 3 centuries, identical progression. The United States currently maintains over 750 military installations across 80 nations. American troops are stationed in 150 countries. Defense commitments include NATO's protection of Europe, defense treaties with Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, ongoing operations throughout the Middle East, and strategic competition with China and Russia simultaneously. Annual military spending exceeds $850 billion, more than the next 10 nations combined. Yet this enormous expenditure proves inadequate. Equipment ages faster than replacement. Recruitment falls short of requirements. If multiple crises erupt simultaneously, Chinese action against Taiwan, Russian movement into NATO territory, Iranian closure of the Persian Gulf, the United States cannot respond to all simultaneously. Military commitments exceed available resources. That is overextension. In 1971, President Nixon severed the dollar's connection to gold. Since that moment, the dollar has been pure fiat currency, backed only by government promise. Since 2000, the money supply has expanded by roughly 400%. Since 2020 alone, over $6 trillion have been created. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. The mechanism differs from mixing copper into silver coins, but the economic effect is identical. The currency is being debased systematically. United States federal debt now exceeds $36 trillion, approximately 120% of annual economic output. Interest payments approach $1 trillion annually, exceeding defense spending. Budget deficits occur every year. In 2024, during economic growth and peacetime, the deficit reached $1.8 trillion. The government borrows to pay interest on previous borrowing. This is the classic debt spiral that destroyed Spain, bankrupted Britain, and collapsed the Soviet Union. American manufacturing has largely disappeared. Design happens domestically, finance happens domestically, consumption happens domestically, but production occurs elsewhere: China, Mexico, Vietnam, and across global supply chains. The United States imports approximately $800 billion more than it exports annually. Critical goods come from abroad: pharmaceuticals, electronics, steel, even components for military equipment. Like Spain watching silver flow out to pay for imports, America watches dollars flow abroad to purchase necessities that were once made domestically. When the dollar weakens or international relationships shift, this dependence becomes dangerous. Productive capacity has eroded. Public trust in institutions has reached historic lows. Crime rates climb. Homelessness increases visibly in major cities. Drug overdoses kill 100,000 Americans yearly. Birth rates have fallen below replacement level. Political polarization makes consensus impossible. Infrastructure degrades without repair. The best educated young people increasingly seek opportunities abroad. These are signs of social decay. 5 stages. Spain reached 5 before final collapse. Britain reached 5. The Soviet Union reached 5. The United States has completed the same 5 stages. Stage 6 involves loss of reserve currency status. This occurs when other nations begin conducting trade in alternative currencies, when central banks reduce dollar holdings, when the privileged position the dollar has held since 1944 begins eroding. Early indicators are appearing. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are developing payment systems that bypass dollars. Central banks globally are accumulating gold at the fastest pace in decades. China and Russia conduct bilateral trade in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia has begun accepting yuan for oil sales, breaking a 50-year pattern. The cracks are forming. Stage 7 is rapid collapse. Not gradual decline measured in decades, but sudden implosion measured in years or months. The Soviet Union transformed from superpower to non-existent within 900 days. Britain lost its empire within 20 years. Spain took longer, but the end result was identical. When reserve currency status fails, when debt becomes mathematically unpayable, when military forces cannot be funded, the decline does not happen gracefully. It happens brutally and quickly. Everyone who believed it cannot cannot happen here learns the lesson every previous empire learned. It can, and it does. 3 empires followed this sequence. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. Each believed it was exceptional. Each believed it was different. Each believed the pattern did not apply to them. They were wrong every time. Currently, the United States tells itself the same story. American exceptionalism, technological superiority, dollar dominance. But the pattern is not about exceptionalism. It is about mathematics. You cannot spend beyond your productive capacity indefinitely. You cannot maintain global commitments without a strong economic base. You cannot manipulate your currency without eventual consequences. You cannot avoid stages 6 and 7 once stages 1 through 5 are complete. The sequence is locked in. The only variable is timing. Perhaps a decade remains, perhaps 5 years, perhaps less, but historical precedent indicates that collapse arrives not through slow decline but through rapid crisis. A currency crisis triggers a debt crisis, which triggers a political crisis. Suddenly, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency becomes regional. The empire becomes memory. Since 2020, the United States has accelerated through every stage. Money creation increased dramatically. Debt grew faster. Military commitments expanded. Manufacturing continued hollowing out. Social cohesion fractured further. We are not walking this path. We are running down it. Perhaps America will achieve what Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union could not. Perhaps reform will come. Perhaps this time truly is different. But the pattern suggests otherwise. The mathematics suggest otherwise. And history, which has watched empires die the same way repeatedly, suggests we are approaching the lesson that powerful nations seem incapable of learning until it is too late. The future is not hidden. It is written in patterns that have repeated across centuries. When systems become unsustainable, they collapse. When currencies lose credibility, they fail. When empires overextend, they contract violently. Understanding these patterns does not prevent them, but it provides clarity during the confusion that accompanies rapid change. When stages 6 and 7 arrive, most people will be bewildered by how quickly their world transforms. Those who understand the historical pattern will recognize what is happening and why. The answers are not in predictions or speculation. They are in documented history. 3 empires followed identical paths to collapse. The United States is following the same path. The mathematics of imperial decline operate regardless of technology, military strength, or national mythology. If you found this analysis valuable, consider following this work, because when the acceleration continues, understanding the pattern will help you interpret events that will seem inexplicable to those unfamiliar with history. The script was written centuries ago. We are simply performing our assigned role in a very old story.